So hello everybody, this is Bhante Joe here, and I'm just here in the Pilikutua/Yangamula forest and thought to record a short ovada for the internet. So I thought that could start with just a little bit of meditation, so I can lean forward a bit and arch the spine, and look about 3 feet in front, and close our eyes. And can focus in on the breath, can know when it's coming in, and know when it's going out. If we breathe in a long breath, can just know I'm breathing in a long breath. And if we breathe in a short breath, can just know I'm breathing in a short breath. And can focus in on the breath at the tip of the nose. And when watching the breath at the tip of the nose, it can be good to make mindfulness as continuous as possible, being aware all the way through the in-breath, as the in-breath turns to the out-breath, all the way through the out-breath, and as the out-breath turns back to the in-breath again. Trying to keep mindfulness as continuous as possible. And can just pose the question in the mind, what would be a really comfortable way to breathe right now? And then one can just let one's body respond on its own. And before we finish meditating, can spread thoughts of goodwill, wishing may all beings all around everywhere be happy and at ease. May they put in place the causes necessary to be happy and at ease. And one can make the mind infinite, can make it unbounded, all the way to the ends of the universe and beyond, in every dimension. May all beings all around everywhere be happy and at ease. and can open our eyes and do a short ovada for the internet. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ saranang gacchāmi, Dhammāṃ saranang gacchāmi, Sanghaṃ saranang gacchāmi. Dutiyampi Buddhaṃ saranang gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Dhammāṃ saranang gacchāmi, Dutiyampi Sanghaṃ saranang gacchāmi. Tatiyampi Buddhaṃ saranang gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Dhammāṃ saranang gacchāmi, Tatiyampi Sanghaṃ saranang gacchāmi. So hope that everybody's keeping well wherever it might be. And 3 or 4 days ago I had the opportunity to go and stay in the Colombo area, and we had a chance to go and see a autopsy and an embalming, both in one day. So it was kind of a very wonderful opportunity. In Sri Lanka, these kind of opportunities are here. In the West, it'd be very hard for me to arrange something like that. To go see it in Canada, you might have to be a medical student or something like this. So it had been about a month earlier that a gentleman had offered to let us go and see these things. So myself and another monk went, and I've been to them different times. I've been to the autopsy. This is my 3rd time going, and my 1st time going to an embalming. So typically monks will go to see autopsies and go to embalmings and these kind of things as a modern way of trying to follow the practice of staying in a charnel ground. And it's kind of in the Buddha's day, they would basically take dead bodies and throw them into the charnel ground. And the bodies would more or less decay there at certain times. So it wasn't like this kind of neat, organized thing. They would burn them. Sometimes people would just leave them. And so there's sometimes be bodies in various stages of decay in different places in these charnel grounds. And there may be workers in the charnel grounds and these kind of things. And so one would get to see the body in all of its stages of decomposition, or one could see the internal organs in the body and these various things. So the Buddha recommends to do these things under a type of practice called kaya anusati. Kaya anusati means mindfulness of the body. So kaya anusati, basically we have a mindfulness of the body in a couple different ways. One is to be aware of it as it's going forward and backwards, basically know how the body is disposed wherever one tries to train to know how the body is disposed wherever it is. The more kind of typical example, as it can cover different practices, is one where one takes these kind of various parts of the body and learns to see the kind of foulness of these different parts in the body. And it's kind of the hair of the head, hair of the body, nails, teeth, skin. It breaks the sutta breaks it up into 31 parts, and in the Sutta Nipata they add the brain. So 32 parts total, depending how one wants to contemplate that. So the Buddha recommends to take up this contemplation of the various parts of the organs as basically a way of reducing one's lust. The main thrust of it is to reduce one's lust. But this kind of practice of kaya anusati can also be used for people who want to cultivate the perception of not self, or cultivate the perception of impermanence. So in a charnel ground, in ancient times, you would see these bodies as they decayed. Start off as kind of a normal-looking corpse, and it'd be bloated, and then various worms, various types of things would come and eat the corpse. Jackals and dogs, and organs would be all over the place. And then you'd have a kind of body with just flesh and blood, and then just a skeleton with the bones scattered different places, and the bones bleached white in the sun, bones stacked up on each other, and bones crumbling into dust. So in other words, this body, contemplating in this way, this body is something that's going to end up, it has the same fate. It's both very unbeautiful to see these things in the charnel ground, and it's a very vivid reminder that this body is not something that belongs to me. There's also a portion of kaya anusati where one can take the body and look at it in terms of elements, break up the 32 parts in terms of the water element. There's parts of the body like urine, bile, phlegm, these vomit, these kind of things. They tend to fall more under the water element. There's parts that are under the earth element, and there's parts that are under the fire element, there's parts that are under the air element. And one learns to see the body as just composed of these things. So in contemplating the body this way, it's a type of thing that one goes to a place like a autopsy or an embalming. And one goes there, not for the not for the kind of novelty of the experience. Actually, it can be a little bit like disheartening. The one fellow we saw was actually a suicide. He killed himself by going onto a train track. So he was actually decapitated. The other lady we saw at the embalming, she was in her 90s or 70s, quite old. So she died a natural death, but she had this bed sore, and it looked like the sore had almost gone to the bone. So it was both these individuals. It's obviously going to be something that arouses a sense of pity, kind of sense of compassion, seeing the suffering that people have at the end of their life. So when one goes to these things, the typical way that one tries to approach this meditation topic is basically to have the proper perception, that the perception one wants to cultivate in mind. That is basically that one wants to have this perception of the foulness, the grossness of the body. And one can look at the body in all kinds of different ways. I once asked my Pali teacher in Toronto, I say, why do you think that more doctors aren't getting significant insights into the Dhamma? Because they see body parts all the time and see bodies all the time. And he said, well, they see the body as an amazing machine. So it was an excellent point, and my Pali teacher brought up a good point, in that these actually, these kind of things, these kind of meditation topics, it's called the Subha Sanya. We bring up the perception of the non-beautiful of the body. So there's different ways that one can look at the body, and depending on how one looks at the body, that's a type of consequence. There's a consequence that comes from that. There's an effect that comes from that. So what one wants to do in taking these things up and going to like an embalming or an autopsy is one wants to basically cultivate this perception, and one wants to get the image in one's head. So when I was in Thailand, one of the things I can't remember where, I may have heard this from somebody, but one thing that that monks may do is they would do walking meditation and then go back and look at the body and try to get an image in their head, and then leave, and then come back again and look at the body and try to get an image in their head. And the purpose of this is to try to have the ability to generate this image to counter the normal perceptions that one has of the body. So these types of meditations, like Kaya Nusati, the perception of the foulness of the body, the perception of the body's elements, the cemetery contemplations. There's also perceptions of the dangers of the body, that it's going to have all these various diseases. These are perceptions that one actually has to bring up to counter the usual perceptions that one has. So this particular path of practice, for people who like to do these types of meditations, these meditations fall more under the Vipassana type of meditation. And they also fall more under what we might call like a dukkha patipada. It's not pleasant it's less, we could say it can be interesting for people. But we call it a painful practice to actually, when one sees one's body as beautiful, as something that's an amazing machine, to bring up the perception of loathsomeness towards it. To cultivate this perception of disgust. It's kind of this, look what's inside of this. I can barely stand looking at this autopsy. I can't stand looking at the skin peeled back on this person's face. It's atrocious. And yet look at a face all the time. People can think about how beautiful the face is, but if the skin was pulled back just a bit, it's very atrocious. Even the smell or the sounds of these things are very bad. So bringing up this perception over and over again is something that replaces the usual perception, and it causes one to try to look to see what it is that one is doing to try to maintain one's attachment to the body. And a lot of a person's attachments center around their body. When a person thinks about who am I, they have an image of their face. Almost all of the various things that a person wants to do in the world are based on things that one tends to be doing with their body. And it's kind of, if one's body is totally crippled, a lot of one's self-identity gets thrown by the wayside. So the reason that we cultivate these, that one cultivates these perceptions, is because the body has these abilities. Yes, it is an amazing machine, but it also has these dangers to it. It will grow old. It will get sick. It will die. And the reason why a person keeps coming back to the world to get new bodies over and over again, is because they feel that having a body and maintaining a body is something that's really worth it. This is the thing. So actually, whatever it is that a mind launches out to in terms of external sensual pleasures, these are all things that one usually perceives through the body. And one sees the searching after these sensual pleasures as something really, really worthwhile. That's what one tends to see. So this type of practice, when you bring it up, when the Buddha teaches it, it's something that can be threatening to people, because intuitively one knows that if one cuts off one's attachment to the body, or tries to, one's also going to have to try to cut off one's attachment to these things that one loves. So this is particularly the case with the main practice in body contemplation, is to attack sexual lust. So that kind of attacking of sexual lust is something that will pull one's mind back from the ways of the world. One can say that this is the foremost sensual pleasure, and if one can cut one's mind off from this, then the reasons for searching out for other sensual pleasures become less. There's a certain amount of maintenance that's required for the body. The body needs food. We have to eat food. It's difficult to go and look for food. As we get older, our ability to even consume food can become less. Certain types of foods start upsetting our stomachs. And maybe they're too fatty, or they become bad for our health. And the body requires this kind of constant washing. Otherwise, it starts to smell very bad. So all these things are a maintenance that one has to do with the body. And one usually is happy to do it because it seems like it's worthwhile. So these kind of perceptions that one cultivates to the opposite, they start to change the calculation. They ideally start to change the calculation in one's mind. Why do I want to have this kind of, why do I want to go get another body? This kind of body is something very foul looking. It's foul on the inside. It stinks. It takes a lot of maintenance. It's something that is full of dangers, various dangers. It's going to be old. It's going to be sick. I'll lose the ability to do whatever I like to do with it, and that will cause me to suffer. The difficulty with this is that in order to let go of the body, one has to try to cultivate senses of peace that are outside of the body. So the Buddha are not related to the body, not dependent on sensual pleasures. That's the way the canon would put it, and that's the accurate way. So because the body is so wrapped up with these external sensual pleasures, if one wants to let go of those things, then one has to cultivate something to the opposite, if one wants to do it really well. So this is why it's said if somebody becomes a non-returner, they have to have mastered concentration, because to completely let go of one's attachment to the body, one at least has to have some other type of pleasure to rest one's mind on. So this practice of body contemplation, going to the autopsies, going to the cemeteries, going to the morgue, it's for the sake of trying to pull one's mind back from the world. Basically try to pull one's mind back from all the things in the world, to try to pull one's mind back from its liking for life, its liking for death, this kind of its liking for sensual pleasures. It's a way that one can approach it. If one likes to take this particular type of meditation up, then it's something that one should feel is good for one. It's kind of like the same way that one will go and try out sampling different types of food. Some food tastes good, feels like it's good for one's body. In a similar way, if one tries this topic out and then goes for it, it should be something that one's interested in. And the way that one approaches it should be something that is also interesting to one, whether it's from a not self or a subha, or from impermanence, or whatever it is. So this contemplation of the body is something that the Buddha really highly recommended, this kaya anusati. It was actually it's the meditation topic that all monks get taught at their ordination. So most people know about mindfulness of breathing, but the standard for all monks at their ordination is this mindfulness of the body. It's not to put down any other topics, of course. It's just to say that this mindfulness of the body is something held up as very important in the canon, something that's worth cultivating. Because so long as one has attachment to their body, so long as one has attachment to sensual pleasures, then it's impossible to completely go beyond the world. But if one cultivates this perception of repulsion, this perception of loathsomeness, this perception of impermanence, if one puts up with the difficulties, the unpleasantness of replacing one's usual perceptions with this, it can help to pry one's mind away from the world and can give the mind more and more peace. And as the Buddha says in the suttas, this is something that culminates in the deathless, it culminates in nibbana. So it's a worthy topic for contemplation. So leave that for reflection, and wishing everybody all the blessings of Dhamma practice.